Hey everyone, Social Solipsist here for another episode of 52 and 52, and this is the last episode of the season. Yay! This week I'm taking a look at Divinity Original Sin, in this case, the Enhanced Edition. My understanding is there's some significant changes from the original release, but I don't really know what they are, so. Eh. Anyway, Divinity Original Sin is a fairly recent, I think it's a few years old now, entry in the kind of classic CRPG genre, similar to games like Neverwinter Nights and Planescape Torment and Baldur's Gate, those sorts of things. Um, and they do a pretty darn good job with it. All things considered, I think that this genre has been making a revival, a slow and quiet, but a bit of a revival in recent times. And Spencer and I were looking for a new game to play co-op, and so I mentioned that I was interested in this, and he grabbed a copy for me. So thank you. Um, Co-op play is a really amazing addition. It was one of the things they really focused on during their PR push for this game. But the co-op play is really huge boon to this game and to this genre in general. Um, and it's done, generally speaking, very well in this game. It's pretty easy to set. There's nothing really to set up short of joining through Steam. Um, and one person hosts and they save the game and all that, and the other person joins, and that's totally fine. Works pretty darn well. Um, and in the game, your characters have almost full autonomy. There is some inflexibility in terms of you gotta be loaded into like the same zone, but aside from that, you can basically do whatever you want. Um, it even does a huge amount within the storyline and that sort of thing, the actual mechanics of the game, to make sure that both players are given agency in key conversations and things like that. Both players are given choices to make, dialogue choices. It's not just the lead character making the decisions. And some people may not like that, but if those people don't like that, they shouldn't play co-op. I think that it does a very good job of making sure that both players are engaged and one's not just along for the ride as a helper. In those dialogue options, you can even choose to like disagree with the other player, and use the built-in conflict resolution mechanic to expand upon the fiction that you build about your character and the other character, or the other player's character, and your helpers. It's really well done, generally speaking. There's an incredible flexibility mechanically in the builds that you can build. A lot of this game is very true to AD&D or other versions of the D&D mechanics, but this game gives you a much more free-form version of the skills and talents and stats that you want to choose and how you want to build your character out. There's definitely some they don't indicate it super well, but if you've played an RPG before, you shouldn't have any problem of seeing that. Yeah, you can't be all things. It just won't work. You don't have enough points to do that. And if you spread your points too thin, you'll be master of none. And that said, I think that it has an almost overwhelming amount of variety in terms of the skills and talents and abilities, and certainly the spells that you can acquire throughout the game. I should say we're not done with this game. I think we're probably far from it, maybe halfway through. So take this all with a grain of salt. But that said, I think we've put 40 or 50 hours into it. So it's not insignificant in length, and we've seen a sizable chunk of time in the game. The game is almost threateningly open in terms of saying like, we really don't mind what you want to do here, go for it. Just almost taunting you to just do whatever you want. This does fall a little bit into the pitfall of not giving a huge amount of direction sometimes, but never to the point of frustration of saying, well, what the hell do we do now? I mean, we have said that, but not in frustration. And yeah, it's generally, you know, it's a very freeform world. However, there are some other pitfalls, but we'll get back to those in a little bit. There are a lot of quality of life improvements from the old CRPG era. I'll be honest, I can't remember what most of them are, because we spent, I'd say, like the first half dozen hours commenting on like these little things that were super great, that we didn't necessarily expect them to have thought of, but they did. I wish I could remember what those things were. I wish I had written them down, because they were very well done. But generally speaking, this has been brought pretty well into, you know, the 20 teens. Oh God, just I was trying to figure out what the term was for that, and then I said that, and that bothered me. Anyway, I digress. Yeah. So props to them for making lots of little quality of life improvements to get around some of the obtuseness of the old CRPGs. That said, unfortunately, the core of the old CRPG mechanics, sort of the movement and interaction and combat stuff, while nicely added onto, have not been tweaked very well to match the quality of life improvement. And so they do still show their age, especially when trying to do things like make precise combat maneuvers and that sort of thing, since the arena that you're in is a bit freeform. And likewise trying to do precise maneuvers when you're out of combat, when you're just walking around and you're trying not to step in that puddle of fire or you'll die. Likewise for the combat, you can't undo a misclick. Even if your turn hasn't ended, you can't fix a screw up. And I've definitely misclicked a few times in combat and just like walked straight into the enemy ranks to be brutally stabbed from all sides, just from a misclick. So that's a little bit frustrating. Targeting ranged weapons of various kinds does very little to warn if you're about to do something dumb, like shoot a post. There's a little indicator if your shot is blocked, but it doesn't hold your hand about warning you at all, for better or for worse. There's no lock-on for aimed abilities either, which I guess you could argue it shouldn't have, but I really think it should. I don't see any particular reason why you shouldn't be locking on your shots. It seems easy. Like, if you want to shoot at the ground, you hold control to shoot at the ground instead. But otherwise, it should lock onto the target that you're clearly aiming at. And this gets particularly annoying when you have enemies that have idle animations where they move around a lot, because you're not aiming at their square. You are literally aiming at the hitbox of their polygons. So if they're moving all over the place, and they move, you can miss your shot. Well, you can just not shoot them. Not even because the game decided you missed, but because you stopped highlighting them because they moved. Because your cursor stayed in the same place and they moved. So yeah, again, the out of combat movement is like, it's fiddly at best, and you can kill yourself on environmental effects by accident really easily. Like just Puddles of Death is Puddles of Death, the name of my shoegaze band. The worst part of that is when you get into the puzzles in the game. they're almost completely a waste of time, just frustration, not fun, not really adding a whole lot besides an obstacle, because the difficulty really comes from the poor controls. Um, Not the actual, not any clever puzzle design or anything like that. The answers to a lot of these things are just get lucky or, you know, trial and error it out and die 10 times before you chuck the teleportation pyramid to the exact right place where you're not going to get seen by the turret and destroyed immediately. It's weird. It doesn't add a whole lot. Um, I wish there were better puzzles. I don't wish there weren't any puzzles, but as it is, they're not very fun. They're just obtuse for no reason. Um, on the topic of the pyramids, actually, many mechanics in the game go almost entirely unexplained, or they're well built but would be invisible due to just being obtuse and never mentioned. Crafting in particular is really extensive. You can build a huge amount of stuff, but they barely, if ever, tell you about it. And anything beyond basic recipes is almost impossible. Like, you can do experimentation to find crafting recipes. Obviously, if you mate arrowheads to arrow shafts, you're gonna get arrows. But lots of the interesting stuff that you'd actually like to have, you know, like crafting spells, you just have to look it up in some forum or something. I don't know how else you could possibly figure some of these things out. You do find a lot of crafting recipes in books, but the reading books and the book mechanic, and even just trying to find the books to begin with, or getting them in the right order so that you actually know the procedure, the steps to get there, it's a whole thing. And just, you know, excessively obtuse. Moving to a more broad thing, I guess. There are a significant number of bugs in the game, which is particularly disappointing given that this is the, you know, post version 2.0 re-release. This is the enhanced edition. This is the version that was supposed to be, you know, the best version, but there's tons of bugs. Most of them are really non-critical or can otherwise be fixed by just reloading the game. But it's kind of embarrassing how many of them there are. I don't really know that much about the size of the development team or that sort of stuff, or how much time they ended up having. Before this entry, Divinity was not an unknown franchise, but certainly did not get the same level of press, I don't think. So I don't really know what their resources are like, if I can talk. But there, you know, lots of things, sound dropouts for, you know, music and all that. I've had some pretty funny ones where, like, literally everything drops out except for the grunts of one enemy, and that's all that I hear for no reason. There's missing textures, misplaced characters, like characters that warp, for your player characters that warp. There, in the co-op mode, there's broken turn order and health bars that are just fiddly. Like, I'd say a good 80% of the time I load into the game and my main character is down 20% on his health, and I ask Spencer if my character is, and he says nope, he's got full health. I don't know what's going on. Just, you know, these small things that you would think would have been caught by you know, these are small bugs, but they're significant in terms of, like, tiers of game testing bugs. And I feel like if this had had more extensive QA or better QA, a lot of these things ought to have been found, but I'm not an expert on that. It has a somewhat limited soundtrack, which is often not very notable, which is definitely disappointing, since, like, a hallmark of some of the, like, old school CRPGs was really extraordinary music. Not necessarily like super good quality, but interesting and unique and matching the area you're in, those sorts of things, matching the themes that are going on. But the music here is really unremarkable, and there isn't a lot of it, and so you'll hear the same music in one zone for hours and hours and hours on end. And it's not so poor to be annoying, but every time you notice the music, it's like, oh, there's that track again, the one track. Uh, um, in a similar vein to that, I guess, the voice lines for general NPCs are very few, sometimes only one, and they will get looped over and over and over again with far higher frequency than they are meant to. Far higher frequency than I assume they are meant to. I'm going to give the game the devs the benefit of the doubt and say that when you're standing in the Cycial market and every one of the vendors is saying their one voice line every 10 seconds, and they're all kind of grating on the ears, that's not really supposed to happen. But holy shit, when you're standing there just trying to, go through somebody's inventory and buy and sell stuff for 10 minutes, you had to listen to the same voice line 100 times, and it's really annoying. To the point where I've thought about just turning the voices off because they're very rarely worth listening to. I appreciate that the amount of voice lines that were recorded for more critical characters, and I don't think that they're particularly bad, but they are nothing to write home about. And so, I wish it had been a little more firmly in one camp or the other in terms of, I don't know, improve it or quiet it down. Combat wise, again, I guess the difficulty does not scale well, and that's not particularly in game, but like the literal synthetic difficulty selection that you make when you start the game, or you can make from the menu. Medium difficulty, the like normal difficulty, can definitely be a slog. Pretty much every combat that is of any importance or size requires you to restart several times after dying, just so you know what you're walking into, so you know which characters you need to focus down to kill, so you know like what random nuke spell somebody's gonna pull out and ruin you with, because you just get melted really quick. And a lot of the combats are, have too many enemies. It would be one thing if there were a bunch of enemies and they were all like one or two hits, but I'm talking like a lot of combat is, hey, here's 10 enemies and they're all almost statistically the same as you. It can be very difficult. They also don't respect the same rules, but we'll get back to that in a minute. I guess there are other fights that are just bullet sponges, where basically you already know how the fight's gonna end. When you're a couple of turns in, either you're gonna win or you're gonna lose, and it's just a matter of time. And sometimes those fights can take 30 minutes to finish. So I think on the whole, I recommend playing on the low difficulty, because the difficulty is high even there, or it certainly can be. It does make some of the other fights a little bit too easy, but the hard fights are still a slog. And not having to restart them 6 times just because you got blown up by a lucky shot, it adds a little more, or decreases your level of frustration in general, I think. Yeah, I guess related to the combat, stealth mechanics are pretty half baked. Sneak attacks are nearly impossible to pull off, and they don't provide any significant advantages when they're executed. I would really have liked to see a more D&D style sneak attack system where like your whole team receives a full round of free combat against flat-footed enemies, because there are plenty of cases where I would like to have pulled that off. But that is not only not the case, but it's impossible to even sneak up on somebody. Like, even with my sneak skill up a significant amount, if somebody is looking in my direction and their vision cone sees me, I am seen. The sneak mechanic, it's almost pointless. Um, it really doesn't seem to functionally do a whole lot. And so having it in there at all can get a bit frustrating. Um, yeah. Uh, Likewise, on the frustration and getting back to the issues with characters, NPCs not respecting the same rules. The number of casters and rangers with enemy casters and rangers with like super high damage plus tons of elemental and status effects that they can apply, is it's frustrating, especially for melee focused characters, which is 2.5 out of our party of 4. Um, like you can eat just a handful of elemental arrows before you even get close, and that's just not a whole lot of fun when you get there and you're already 2/3 dead. And damage over time effects and the status effects are, I would say, pretty darn overpowered. They can, like, the one that we've been dealing with most recently, that is not the most significant, but perhaps the most hilariously frustrating, is the trip mechanic, where if you walk on ice too fast or somebody applies a trip effect to you, you get knocked down and you just can't walk and you can't get up. You don't even get like a roll to get up. There is a mechanic for, I think it's bodybuilding. You roll against bodybuilding, but it's a passive roll, on effect, not each turn or anything like that to see if you pick yourself up. Nope, you're just out of the fight for a couple of turns, and people are gonna fill you with arrows again. And likewise, with ice and with other a lot of the other elemental effects, they lie on the ground, and become every battlefield that has any elemental caster on it becomes a minefield, because every area is burning or electric or poisoned or something like that. And while the player characters, if they walk through any of those, not only take initial damage, but take an extreme damage over time anytime they move or pass a turn, the NPCs don't. So if you apply, they will take the initial tick of damage, when it's applied to them, or if they walk through it. But unlike the player characters, NPCs that have poison on them and are walking steps, generally for player characters, it's applied for every AP that it's applied. The tick of damage is applied every time an AP is expended when you're moving. But for NPCs, it doesn't. So status effects on NPCs is way less powerful. And I really don't understand why that is. It's super weird. And it can get really frustrating to watch, an NPC walk through something that nearly almost killed you and be almost fine. But anyway, I'm getting pretty rambly at this point, but I guess I would say that the game feels like it's being run by the type of DM who lets the party, who wrote this, this great story, and lets the party explore to their heart's content, but sort of didn't consider or anticipate the like extended scrutiny of certain parts of the game, like standing in Seal Market, or looking over here or looking over there, for a little bit too long. And also refuses, also a DM who refuses to bend the rules from what it says in the player's handbook. Even when it would improve fun or balance or something like that, they're like, nope, nope, these are the rules and you're going to abide by them, even though they don't even logically make sense in this universe necessarily. You know, yeah. So, for better or for worse, we've been having a lot of fun with this game, and we will presumably, unless we hit a really severe stumbling block, we will finish it. But that said, I think we've both said that we probably wouldn't play this nearly as extensively, or possibly even continue to play it, if we weren't playing it together. Just because these list of frustrations are not insignificant. The underlying game is a heck of a lot of fun, but if we weren't there to commiserate with one another, these would really start to grate a heck of a lot more. So anyway, thank you guys all for watching yet another episode of 52 and 52, the finale of season 2. I appreciate you all watching the channel, subscribing, whatever else. I hope you have had a not shitty year. And I hope you you go into the new year, have some fun, and have a good time. What the fuck does that mean? Anyway, I'm tired. I'll see you guys later.
At the end of every turn, my camera gets fucked.